Well, it's time for another one of my deep dive caster talks. Is what I guess these are. I still don't have a name for them, even though people suggested them. Anyway, I'm joined this time by Medic, who is it's what 8 p.m. there.
Yeah, it's not that late yet, but
Okay.
I'm quite an early to bed, early to riser type
Really?
person. So
Okay.
usually I
Well,
want to
I
be
mean, I see all your pictures all the time, posting running and all this stuff. You're very physical.
yes, I try to be. I have like periods where I do it intensely for a month, and then I have one day where I eat a lot of pizza, and I feel that negates the month, and so then
Ah.
what's the point continuing? Because you've already eaten the calories.
Well, if a lot of pizza on one day negates a month's worth of work, then I am super doomed because that is
Yeah.
that is a ratio that I am definitely not keeping. Either way, this is brought to you by Alienware for folks that don't know that yet. There's a link right here. Anyway, so Medic, you and I think much like Dracos and I have never hung out, right? Or have we?
Yeah. The only time we've been like in close vicinity for a while was the Hotline League live
Yes.
thing at Rift Rivals, but then that night I got quite drunk, and
Yes.
so I wasn't the most coherent person in the world. So
Yes.
we've never actually like hung out and just chatted.
Yes, I know. I don't know why, because it's so funny. Because I feel like I know so many of the EU casters so well, and it's just I think it's just because we've been kind of around each other at stuff. But
Yeah. But
either
like,
way,
I feel like I know you quite well as well. Like
yes,
we did an episode of Hotline League together, and we've chatted from time to time. But you never have that like sit down, have a meal, and actually get to know each other type discussion.
yes. Well, here's the opportunity, at least for me to get to know you. You'll learn nothing about me in the
Oh,
course of this,
excellent.
but so what? I guess we can kind of go back. I have heard rumors that you had a crazy life. And I think, up until now, I thought my expectation was like, oh, he was a doctor of some sort, and then he became a caster. That's wild, but presumably that's not the only story. So I'm guessing your life was not just like growing up in the suburbs and then going to college.
Now, I don't tend to tell this story that much because I never really felt it was relevant, but I guess this is the perfect space to like talk about it. But I grew up as part of a missionary family, so my dad he taught in Bible colleges, and he would teach people how to go in and set up churches in different countries, and we moved around quite a lot when I was young as well. So I was born in Birmingham in England, and then when I was 2 I moved to Denmark. When I was 5 I moved back to England, and then when I was 10 I moved to India for 8 years, grew up in India, and then came back to the UK for a gap year, and then to do university, and then after that obviously Berlin for casting.
That is wild. So I moved around a lot, but all within Southern California. So I thought it was really shitty to leave my friends at a school at any given point in time. But you were literally moving to entirely new countries. I have to imagine. I mean, maybe when you're 2 to 5, that doesn't matter as much. But especially like 10 and going to India, that must have been wild.
Yeah, I think it's strange because I remember at the time it felt awful. We'd gone to Pakistan for a holiday or to visit and see what it was like for about a month previously, and I'd thrown up a lot because of the malaria tablets, and I hated the heat, and we went to a cricket game and were told to leave early because England were beating Pakistan, and we'd get beaten up if we were the only 2 white guys sitting in the stadium. So I didn't have a very good impression of what life would be like in India. And then you're leaving all of your friends, and the first girl that I loved, yes, I was leaving as well. So it was definitely very tough at the start, but I think over time I kind of developed a thicker skin towards moving places, and now I go somewhere, I develop friendships there, and then if I move away from them, there'll be like 2 or 3 people I keep in contact with afterwards, but I don't have that close-knit group of friends that a lot of my colleagues or friends do.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is your friends that you currently have in Berlin really need to jostle to get those 2 or 3 spots, because if you end up leaving,
yeah, exactly,
the rest of them are gone.
Vedi's getting tossed. Dracos is on the edge. Frosk is definitely in there, mostly because Josie's English, and so we'd probably see each other if I moved back to England. But
gotcha.
I think there's the friendships that you develop knowing that they're going to be long-term things, and then there's the friendships you develop where it's like, okay, we'll hang out, we'll see how things go, but if I moved away, I don't think that this would last after that. So
if our friendship sparks already digitally internationally, that I get to subvert all those rules, right? Because then
it's kind of a whole different category, isn't it? Because I have a lot of friends that I've known for quite a few years online, but I don't think I would treat them the same way. So like Quickshot is probably my best friend in Berlin. Quickshot and Vedius are like up there, and so there I wouldn't put you in the same boat as a Vedius or Quickshot, even if we ended up chatting every night and sliding into each other's DMs and such, because it's just a very different friendship.
Okay, but it perhaps is more stable than some of these other friendships that you have in. Yep. Okay, I mean, I'll take this. It's not as deep.
You can be my slow and steady stability, and then I'll have all of these pockets of greatness with my other friends.
Fantastic! I'm thrilled to hear that. Okay, so you actually, so did you move around much within India, or were you in a single city that whole time?
So we lived in a place called Tamil Nadu. Well, the state is called Tamil Nadu, and we lived in the Western Ghats, which is a mountain range up at the top of those. It was a town called Kodaikanal of about 200,000 people. We moved around a lot inside the town. So I think at one point I counted we went through 17 houses in 5 years or something.
What?
Yeah, I know. Like it was moving somewhere, staying with someone for a short period of time, and then moving to another friend's house, and then finding a place we could stay in for a little while, but then moving again. And like that sort of fluctuance. The oscillator, fluctuance is probably the best word, of just living and not really knowing where you were going next is definitely a defining characteristic of my childhood.
Okay. Do you look on that positively?
I think it set me up in some really good ways. So like I don't get the strain that someone would have if they moved away from their childhood home. And I'm very good at finding things that I can make home in a new place. So like Berlin very quickly became home to me because I don't define home by the same locales and the same people. I define it by the friendships I develop and the things I can pick up in the city. But then you lose out a lot of the lasting friendships. So I don't have people who could tell me what I like. Can't be like, oh, we were playing together at 6, or like when we were 10, remember when we did this, right? I've got 2 people I message every couple of months from high school. I have no friends really left from university. I've got one friend from university that I can remember, and then his friendship group that I've kind of molded myself into. And apart from that, like it can be a little bit isolating because it takes me a while to then open up if I know that I might be moving soon.
So what was the, I don't know, day to day like, or even I guess month to month when you were growing up in India? Because I gotta imagine, especially given all the moving, that was interesting. I don't know if you were going to school there. Like,
yeah,
what was that experience like?
So whenever anyone asks me this, I always find it a little bit odd because it's it's a good question. It's just take me a while to get used to it being a good question, right? Because to me, it's just childhood, right? Like that was just my day to day. It was normality to me, and it was difficult to reconcile the fact that is odd to other people, right? Yeah. Because most people say go to school, etc. So I went to an American international school called Kodaikanal International School. It's normal school life. You go in every day, etc. Weekends would be spent at church most of the time. I was very religious, probably until I was about 21. And yeah, most of my time would just be lessons, etc. So we did something called the International Baccalaureate, which is a Swiss-based high school program that gives you like a grade out of 45 at the end of it. There was a lot of extracurricular things, so we'd go out into the local villages and help build like hospitals and things like that. And then I was very into drama and into rowing as well when I was at high school. So I did, and ultimate frisbee. Those are my like 3 main hobbies. The
ultimate frisbee I think is awesome. The rowing thing, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody without your accent that has ever said they're very into rowing.
It's true. That's true. It was good though, because you get up at like 5 o'clock. There was a nice like 2-kilometer lake, and you'd kind of you wouldn't have to think about anything. You're there on still water, just stroking the oars. I realized when I
I think if you hadn't paused when you said stroking, I think it would have been fine.
I was trying to think of the next word, and if I just finished on stroking, then it's definitely not fine. So,
well, okay, so I think one thing that I was thinking about as you were going through all this stuff is like, how did you play video games? I mean, that's the most important thing.
I mean, it was for a lot of people. For me, I really didn't get into video games until I was in med school. So I didn't. The first online competitive game I played was League of Legends.
Really?
Yeah. Before that, my dad and I had a PS2. We had a PS as well, so we played Actua Soccer, and then FIFA, and then a bit of Tomb Raider, and then PES.
What would you have
Um,
identified as? And I hate that this is like an identification, but would you have identified as a gamer at any given point in time before you
No,
played
I
League
was
of
someone
Legends?
who played games. I think if you had asked me for an identity, I would have been an academic who was really into drama
Okay,
at high
but
school.
this was just like a hobby on the side. Was like sometimes playing video games.
It was more just like time to spend with my dad, right?
Yeah.
We both enjoyed it, and it was a nice way just to sit down with an hour and make sure we have some father and son time. Like especially after my mom died, making sure that we had some time where we could just be each other was really important.
Yeah. When
Be
did she
witty.
when did she pass?
When I was 14,
Okay.
so it was like we moved to India. She got sick when I was about 8. We moved to India. e- Because my dad and mum felt that God was calling them to India, and I
Yeah.
think we moved away from healthcare that could have been quite helpful. But then she came back for a little while, and we went back to India. It metastasized, and she passed away when I was 14.
I assume that was a pretty defining moment in your life.
I think it's always going to be, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to think of what my life would be like without it. But you can say that about a lot of different moments, right? I think people have those. I'm always one of those. I wouldn't be the person I am without those sorts of moments in my life and without the decisions I've made. And I don't regret the decisions I've made, but you can see how it's changed me as
Right.
a person.
Yeah. No, it's a sentiment I can definitely identify with a lot. Okay, so you ended up staying in India even after that took place.
Yeah. So my mum and dad had always felt that God was calling them to live in India and to live in Kodaikanal and try and set up this church and work with one of the Bible colleges out there. So mum actually we'd actually come home for my birthday to go to Alton Towers, which is a theme park in the UK, and mum stayed in India and ended up dying there for like while we were away. And after that, it was never in doubt that we'd stay. I think maybe there were things going through my dad's mind. Maybe he was thinking about it, but the expectation was always that why would we go back just because of this? It would feel strange to have put so much time into following what God wanted us to do and then come back, right?
Yeah. So, did you at 18, as I guess you said, when you went back home?
Yeah. Well, England.
Yes, England. Sorry, I shouldn't say home. As you've
No, like,
identified, home is
I
just
sort of
wherever
read it
you
with
are.
home, but yeah, home. I understand what you mean by home, and
Yes.
I would have called it home at the time. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So at
Yeah.
18, you go back to England. Did your father come with you? Was that always the plan? Is like you would grow up in India and then you would go back there?
So I wanted to come back for university, and it was as an English national, I get a lot cheaper fees being in England for university than I would have got in India. And also English medical schools are really good, right? My dad still lives out in India. He lives in a place called West Bengal now. Excuse me, with my stepmom and my step siblings.
Okay.
I've got 2 stepsisters and a stepbrother. And yeah, one of the last things that happened before I left was them getting married. So that was an interesting experience as well. Like I love her as a person, but it's odd thinking about my dad having a wife. And she's never tried to be my mom, and she's never like tried to put
Yeah.
herself in that space. But it's always strange to think about.
Yes. I mean, it's super, especially depending on the age at which this stuff happens, because both of my parents divorced and both of them remarried. My father recently got divorced again, but my mother remarried shortly after I graduated from high school, and definitely never like stepdad, but don't refer to him as stepdad. You know, he's John,
Yeah.
and yeah.
I refer to my stepmom as so as well.
Yes.
But like I love them all very dearly, and I love my siblings very dearly as well. But it's never going to be the same. And
Right,
especially
yes.
since like I haven't had the chance to grow up with them. I spent like a year with them, getting to know them before I left, and we chat every now and again. But
Yeah.
I feel more like friends than family.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so Ed, you did a gap year, which is a term that I know a lot. I don't know if it's a UK term or a European term. We don't tend to use that term over here, but it's basically you're like, I'm going to take a year off and have a good time before I go to college.
Yeah. I didn't have the best of times, I'll be honest. So what ended up happening was I missed an exam that I needed to get into medical school in the UK, and
Okay.
so I only did the exam for Oxford and Cambridge. Applied to Oxford, got through to their interview stage, but then didn't make it after that. So then I needed to find something to do in that year, to after I'd redone the exam for the rest of the universities, and I ended up working as a healthcare assistant in a nursing home. Most like good on the CV, and helping people obviously is very close to my heart, and then you make some money out of it as well, right? But that was not the most enjoyable year I've had. It was a lot of washing people, showering people who can't get out of bed themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was again glad I did it, but if I could have chose not to do it, I probably would have.
I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for people who do that line of work, because I spent about a year working in a nursing home whenever I was in high school, doing not any of that type of stuff, but working at the front desk, and I started as a dishwasher. So, but the stuff that you see and the events that you take place, and downstairs was a like specific Alzheimer's care unit, or people who have dementia. So there's a lot of stuff that you get insight into whenever you're doing that type of stuff, and it's definitely.
I think it's really humbling, right? And it's that you sometimes get lost in the weeds a little bit just thinking about it as a job, but then there are the times that you remember that these are people, and they're people's relatives and their fathers and their mothers, and it brings you to your knees a little bit. And I was glad I could give them the best care that I could at the time, and I was glad that I went through it the way I did, but it's a scary thought.
Yes. Taking a step back, one of the things that I noticed you mentioned is that you were 18, but you were trying to take an exam to get into medical school, which I think implies that your system is very different than mine, because over here you go to college first, and then while you're in college you decide that you're going to go to medical school. That's when you start having to take those exams. So I didn't even realize that this was something you have to decide so early.
Yeah, in the UK it's an undergraduate degree, so it's the first degree you do out of high school, and usually you apply in your last year of high school and then go into it.
That's wild, because I feel like so many people change their mind on what they want to do while they're in the first couple of years of college.
You don't say. Don't say. I think I agree with you, and it's a 5-year course, and it's a drag, and I think there's a 20% rate of people leaving within the first 2 years of becoming a doctor. Leaving English medicine, at least, like mostly because Australia has really good medicine as well, and they take the same degree, and also private companies give you a lot of money. But it's very, the English system is very driven towards getting you into a university degree, and because medicine is one that you can really only use in one field, it kind of forces you down that.
So it's an undergraduate degree, and then do you have to go get do you go to med school after?
No. So the med.
So you could become a doctor.
I am a doctor.
I know you are a doctor. I'm saying you, in the general sense, could become a doctor within 4 to 5 years there.
5 years.
5 years. Okay.
It's always a 5-year degree, and there's 2 different schools. You can do a 5-year degree that's 3 years study, like 3 years academics, and then 2 years hospital placements, or you can do one that is hospital placements from the start with study integrated, which is what I did. So my second day, I was in a general practitioner surgery interviewing patients and chatting with them.
That is wild, because I just in the US it feels like, and obviously it's well before this, but in some sense you feel like you're not a doctor until you're 30. There's just so many layers of stuff, from my understanding, my limited understanding, admittedly, but it's
I think what the US does is they condense the sort of post degree quite quickly. So in the US you study into your specific field, whereas in the UK I studied everything. I would have done 2 years of generalist training, and then I would have gone into whatever field I wanted. So I probably would have been 30, 35 before I'd actually got into where I really wanted to be. It's just the initial will get you onto the ward as soon as possible and get you stabbing people with needles,
Thanks. So I have an assumption on why you decided to be a doctor, but maybe, what really drove that desire?
So I think I'd always wanted to be one since I was about 5. obviously, and I assume this is your assumption.
Yeah.
Seeing my mother in hospitals and seeing the care that she was getting and the amount of support that she could be given was definitely a motivating factor. But I've always been someone that has, like, one of my mantras is I want people to be better for having known me or for having me around, and being caring and being generous. And I mean, the way I do it now is like replying to DMs and being like, "Hey, you're doing a good job." Or if someone messages me and say I'm having a tough day, I'll be like, "Hey, like I can't help that much, but I will reply and I'll try and do something." Right. So yeah, it definitely drove me towards it. I think my mum being sick and her knowing and supporting the fact that I wanted to be a doctor when she died, and like always being very confident in the fact I'd make a good one, definitely sustained the desire for a while. And I mean, I talked about this in an interview, I think last year. It was one of the biggest struggles with leaving medicine, was not knowing if she'd be proud,
Yeah.
and not knowing like if she would have supported. I know she would have supported me because she was my mom and she loved me, but it's never easy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so you went through, you became a doctor, but during something happened, I guess, while you were in school, and what is interesting is I have a portrait in my mind of this like very religious, pious, good boy, wholesome, wants to save and heal the world, and then EUS solo queue just completely destroys this individual, corrupts them. It's just a
You hit
testament
the
to
nail on
everything
the
I've
head,
heard
Travis.
about that region.
As soon as Zoe was released, I was like, hey, I have to do something to heal this game.
Yes.
So I came over to cast
Oh, see, you interpreted it as heal. I assumed it corrupted you. That,
okay.
That
Both ways.
the good man he lost his healing powers and everything. It just he turned dark.
I think like obviously that was a factor, and I totally agree with you there. I think I tried out casting a little bit and really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the sound of my own voice. I even applied to cast when I was in third year med school with the LCS, EU LCS, and Trevor rejected me, which I don't blame him for, because at the time all I did was shout, and I was very good at shouting.
Yeah, you're a better man than me, because I would blame him constantly. Riot turned me down for a job, and I
do in private, but in public I can't blame him, because he still decides the talent rotation. So
that's good point. Very good point.
And I think as I came out of med school, I was kind of caught at a crossroads, and there were some factors that made me want to stay into medicine. I had a long-term girlfriend. We'd been going out for about 6 years. Doing the first year of a UK post-medical school, like it's called the Foundation Year 1. That gets you your full accreditation. That's the one, certification as a doctor. So it means that I'm not on a provisional license anymore. I don't need supervision. And so I was like, okay, I'll stick out the year. And about 6 months into the year, I had a string of 14 nights in a row, or 14 12-hour days in a row. And on the 13th, I got shouted at for 20 minutes by a patient's family, who I'd never met the patient before that day. I just had to tell them that there wasn't anything we could do for this man, and all the medicine we were using wasn't working. And then I just got shouted at for 20 minutes. And the problem wasn't that they shouted at me, right? The problem was I was powerless. It was like I have no blame on them. Like you need to take out your frustration at me. That's fine. I can take it, right? But what I couldn't take was I had seen so many patients go out of the door and then come back a couple of months later, or come back a couple of weeks later, and it just broke me. And I've talked about some of the specific things before, and I'm not going to get into graphics here, because I think like it's gruesome. But I got to a point where I had actually been talking to SPO TV, when they were doing LCK, and we were in discussions as to whether I could pick up a job with them. I talked to Super Evil Megacorp, who were doing Vainglory, which is a mobile. I've been casting for them for a little bit, and it was about 2 weeks before you had to go into your next job, and I was just like, no, I can't do it. So I went to my head of foundation year and was just like, I'm leaving. And they were like, are you sure you want to do this? I was like, yep. And they're like, cool. And then I left, and I probably made the decision within a week of having like the initial thought to doing it. But I was very fortunate that I had enough money for the next year from Vainglory and from other jobs I could pick up. But it's it's a decision that I look back at it and it feels like I took it really lightly, but it was definitely a long time in the coming, a long time in the making.
So I understand why you left your medical profession, but I kind of want to take a couple steps back and figure out what happened when you got into League of Legends, because you had previously said that you were not super into gaming, or you gamed, but you were not like as hardcore as most of us, I think, would say, like, oh, grew up on PC games, or like, you know, was semi-pro in this other game. So what really happened? When did you start playing games more?
All right. So I was introduced to League of Legends in first year of university when we were in like dorms, and I only had a Mac at the time. My friend, a guy called Peter, he was like, "Hey, you should play this new game, League of Legends." I was like, "Oh, cool! I'll try it out." And obviously, I had to. Is it Time Warp or Time Box or something where you run Windows on a Mac?
You're thinking of Time Machine. It's not Time Machine. It's like Parallels or.
Oh yeah, something like that, right? Like, and I was trying to run Windows on my Mac to then run League inside of the Mac, and it was awful. And I hated the game, and I'd never wanted to play League of Legends again. And then about 7 to 8 months later, I ended up setting up a PC, and I downloaded it again. One of my friends, he was like, "Oh, we should just play together." So we played a few games, and I got hooked, and I kept playing, and I kept playing, and I kept playing.
What year was this?
This would have been, when did I graduate? 2015, so it would have been 2010.
Okay.
Is that right? Yeah, about 2010, 2011. So I think, if I remember correctly, Caitlyn was the first champion I ever saw as a new release.
Yeah.
But
so this is like right when the game's coming out, essentially.
Yeah, it was pretty new, but then it was a year later that I actually started playing properly.
Gotcha.
And I played a bunch and made a bunch of friends, and I joined a group called Tactically Fabulous because one of my friends was part of it, and then we all played together. And after a while, we started scrimming each other, and we had too many people. So I was like, hey, I'll stream this. Got quite drunk, enjoyed listening to myself cast it, and then it all kind of just went from there. Right?
I mean, had you been watching the esport then?
I didn't watch Season 1 World Championships. I think I watched 2. Yeah, wait, 3 was TPA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely watched 3 onwards. But
no,
before that,
2 was TPA.
2, okay, I definitely watched TPA. So yeah, I watched from Season 2 World Championships.
Okay. And so I mean, there's a decent amount of time passing there. So you're playing it in 2011 or so.
Yep.
And then Season 2 was 2013, I want to say, right?
I feel it was
2012. It was 2012 because the season is always on the same as the number. So it's in 2012. And then when did you start? You said you got drunk and did some casting. Like, when did that happen?
That would have been around middle of 2012, I'd say. And then I applied to a job with European Gaming League because they were looking on Reddit for some casters, and I could probably find the Reddit posts somewhere in the annals, and started doing that. And then by middle of 2013, I'd cast enough that I was ready to apply for Riot.
Okay. And you applied for Riot, but that was when you got turned down.
Yes.
Okay. And so this was all happening while you're in med school, because you said you graduated in 2015.
Yeah, so I actually worked it out, and I played more League of Legends than I went to hours of lectures for med school.
Okay. Was that because you were skimping out on lectures, or?
I do not mean to sound arrogant here, and I'm going to try and choose my words carefully.
You can say it.
I've always naturally been gifted that I can quite quickly pick things up. Right.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at a topic, assuming I understand the basic mechanics behind it, I can pick it up quite quickly. So most of the basics of med school I was able to pick up quite rapidly. I none of the in-depth stuff that you need to know to be a high level.
You were looking at a diagram of a heart and you're like, I could transplant that. That seems easy.
Oh yeah, 100%, right? No, but I could be like, that's the ventricle, that's the atrium, this is the aorta, this is what it does, this is what vasodilators are, etc. Right? And so I was very fortunate that I was able to pick it up quite quickly. And my school uses a method that really connects with me, which is called spiral learning. So you'd learn something in year 1 at a base level, and then you come back to it in like year 2, year 3, and you just add on to it. So it's like you're building this spiral of knowledge. And so that was always I always found it pretty easy to connect with. And a part of it is also like I was a lazy bum and I enjoyed playing League of Legends and I didn't enjoy going to lectures. So
do you think you would have, had your life been different, just gone super into video games when you were younger? I mean, like it almost feels like it grabbed you in the same way so many games have grabbed people when they were, I don't know, 12 or 13.
I definitely think I could have. I think being in India, like we didn't have good internet. I could never have played it like online games. We had trouble with AIM Messenger. Never
Yeah.
mind like actually streaming or anything. But I have an addictive personality. I have it with a lot of things. I tend to get like really into things for a short period of time, and so, or even for longer periods of time. And so I think if I'd been introduced to games earlier, I would have been really into them.
So you get super into League of Legends, and you just figured this would be like a hobby on the side while you were in college, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the casting, it was just, I just do this every now and again. I did volunteer work around the UK. I started getting a couple of paid gigs, but it was never meant to be a career path. It was never
Yeah.
meant to be something I could do and actually make proper money off it.
Why do you think it is that, and this I've noticed this trend across a ton of games, British people seem to just casting jobs, and British people, it's so common. What is the deal there?
I think it has to be the accent and the elocution, right? Like, because most volunteer and like lower level gigs just want someone that can talk English and sound like they know what they're talking about. And like English people are very good at sounding confident even when they're not meant to be,
Yeah.
and then talking English well, right? And so I know a lot of the jobs I got at the start, maybe I wasn't the best caster, but because I had a nice sounding voice and I looked okay, I got the job, right?
Yeah. Did you know what you were talking about when you were casting in those days?
I I actually started off as a color caster
Okay.
for like the first 6 months, and I was silver. So no, I did not know what I was talking about at all.
Just very
I
confidently describing item builds, and yeah.
oh mate, the biggest discussion we would always have on a cast is skin war, and I like it's something that has very quickly died out of casting, and I'm thankful that it has. But you'd always get into the loading screen and be like, I don't know enough about team compositions or power or like when item spikes happen to talk about that. No, we're going to talk about which of these skins we think is the best skin in the game. It's like,
Yes.
oh, but that one's got a legacy skin and this guy's only got a rare one.
Well, whenever I'm sure you have to figure out what to fill with on the loading screens whenever there's no storylines or discuss. It's like these teams haven't been competing in a league for the past several years, and these players haven't been competing for. So I'm sure that's just you scrambling to figure something else out. Okay, so you graduate. You go. How long did you actually practice?
For a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a decent amount of time. And you said that a lot the decision really came at the end of this like grueling 14-day period, but during that year were you starting to like when did you start to think like
I think I started to think from year 3 of med school, right? Like I almost left med school in third year to go and try and get this job, right? If I got the job at EULCS, I think I would have left. But it was definitely a slower burn across the course of the year because there were some moments that I was like, oh, I'm going to be a urologist. I'm going to be a consultant. I did some really cool stuff with cystoscopes and like, there are bits of medicine that I love, right? Like it's like the 5% of like, oh, you get to put in your first chest drain, or you get to see your first patient that has a pneumothorax and you stab a needle in their chest, or you see this like ruptured AAA and you're like, oh, we have to get him into surgery. We've got 4 minutes to save this guy's life. If he's not in surgery in 4 minutes, he died. So the stakes
these
are very high.
It's fascinating because whenever you when you said that there are things that you love about medicine,
Yes.
I would have expected you're like that moment when the patient's going to be okay, or something like incredibly academic, like, oh, you discover this thing. But the things that you liked are stabbing people.
No, so it's the emergency medicine and the quick fixes in inverted commas. Like I love the idea of someone coming in with an emergent problem. I know how to fix it, and I'm one of the few people that does because I'm like I spent this time like learning it, and then we can fix it. And this person goes from death's door to, hey, I feel much better now, and like that's when you actually save a life, right? Because the rest of the time you're just prolonging death. A lot with medicine, that was like one of the major things that I struggled with. But when someone comes in and like, I think one of my most fun cases was a patient that came into A&E with a tachycardia. I think it was tachycardia. Anyway, with an abnormal heart rhythm, right? And this guy's like pumping. He feels like death. He's like really in a bad state. And then you give him a drug. And the thing you learn as a doctor is when you give this drug, you have to say, so it's going to feel like you're about to die. And that sense of impending doom is like the phrase you have to give them. And then you see the heart rhythm just go flatline and then come back. It's such an incredible feeling. And it's so great to be able to help someone that immediately.
Yeah.
And that's what I loved. And
I
those are
guess
like
like
the
high
5%
stakes
of
problem
it.
solving is
Exactly,
like,
right? Yeah, it's the puzzle. You have
yeah.
to work out what the pieces of the puzzle are within this short window. Otherwise, it's like the ultimate cost, right?
Yes. I guess way, way lower stakes, but like League of Legends probably has a lot of that high moment adrenaline, like decision making
Yeah.
stuff.
And those are the moments of casting I love, right? Like you can, I think my best casts ever were in Athens with Fnatic G2, where it's like everything is on the line. You have this huge emotional crowd behind you, and you sense that your words count and that your words matter, and you have a split second to decide what you're going to say. And that's where I really am driven in casting.
Okay, so that's wild story, but but so you had known for a while you were maybe thinking this was not something you were gonna keep doing. Then you make the decision, and sorry, you said you had a couple different gigs on, kind of waiting for you. Did you take either of those, or what happened in that moment of that jump?
So when I jumped, I had already decided I was going to work with Super Evil Megacorp on Vainglory. So they had a tournament called the Evil 8, which is a weekly, like basically LEC style tournament that they were doing. And I had enough work for, I think, the first 8 months of the year or so.
Okay.
I moved with my girlfriend to where her next doctor's placement was, because you move around each year.
That must have been an interesting conversation, by the way.
Yeah, that was a fun one. That was a really tough one.
Because I assume she was not. Yeah. She's like, you're gonna go work for Super Evil Megacorp, casting a mobile video game.
She and I had been together for a while by then. She'd been with me through the whole third year med school thing as well. Yeah. So we'd had a lot of discussions about me wanting to be a caster. But it still wasn't easy, and I still think she never truly understood why I did it. And we broke up a couple of years ago now. But that conversation was probably the hardest. My nan eventually worked out I'm not a doctor anymore and thinks I commentate on chess. And my dad is always really supportive.
She worked it out? You didn't explain this to her?
I kept telling her that I'm not a doctor, but she's relatively old. And so I'd come back and she's like, how is it being a doctor? And I'd be like, I'm a commentator now. Yeah, and my dad's always super supportive. I think the thing with my dad and I now is it's more we're friends who share our feelings with each other. I think the distance really, really makes it that way. But yeah, my girlfriend was the hardest to convince that it was.
So sorry, I had to sidetrack into that because I thought it was very funny. But so you start doing Super Evil Megacorp stuff, and you said your first eight months. You said you were pretty locked in contractually. Yeah. I assume pretty big financial disparity in that jump.
Oh, no. So this is the thing that everyone always thinks. Doctors in the UK are paid pittance. I got 26 grand as in my first year of being a doctor.
Does that scale up?
It does. You get up to about 70 grand when you're a consultant. And then if you do private work, you can get up to about 100 grand. But it's not US pay at all.
Yes. Well, now that you've said this, I feel like a bunch of people are going to say the US should never move to socialized medical systems or whatever.
I mean, I think the doctors would be willing to take the pay cut. The reason I would never work in the US is because I couldn't align with having to say I can't treat you because you don't have insurance, or by bankrupting people through it, right? And I'm sure there are lots of doctors there who agree with that, and that struggle is one that I could never bear. So
did Super Evil Megacorp was the money compare? I don't need to ask how much, but you're saying it was not that big of a jump.
Yeah, I knew I could survive the year relatively easily with the money that I got from Super Evil Megacorp.
Okay, so you start casting Vainglory.
So I had been casting Vainglory for a couple of years before that.
Sorry, but you start casting it as like a job. That's big.
Yeah. And then just did that for a while, and then so when I left medicine, when I left being a doctor, that's the word I was looking for. I talked to Trevor and was like, hey, is there ever a chance that I get in for LCS? Because they were looking around for casters at that time. He gave me a few things to work on, and I said, okay, I'll be back to you in like 8 months into a year. And then I got back to him, and I went from Vainglory straight into EU Challenger Series. Did that.
And this is what, 2016?
Yeah, so 2016 was Challenge. No, 2017 must have been Challenger Series. Okay. 2018, 19, 20 was, because I did Challenger Series for a year before getting picked up for EU LCS.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How What I actually don't know the order upon which everybody came in, but you are definitely one of the newest folks with
Yeah,
EULCS.
I joined officially
LEC.
in 2018 January, and Ender joined in
Okay,
2019, and Foss joined in 2019,
gotcha.
I think.
Okay, so you do the Vainglory stuff. You start talking to Trevor. He says work on these things. You start to cast the challenger side, and then and you I guess you knew in your mind that you were headed towards the LEC EULCS all along.
I mean, that was always the hope, right? I think when I came into Challenger, the way that our discussions were focused was hey, if you do a good job here, you're next on the LEC or next on the ULCS. So I always had it in my mind that that would be where I was going, and I think even in the contract we had like rates for if you wanted me for a day on EULCS this year or whatever. So after I got in my foot in the door, I was pretty confident that I could work my way up into EULCS.
And when did you make the move from the UK to Berlin?
Start of 2018, I think. Yeah, because I moved into a place in Adlershof, which is near where the studio is, and then after a couple of months, I moved in with Vedi.
Okay. Why only a couple months? What happened during those couple of months? You didn't like where you were? You became
Oh
good
no,
friends
so it
with
was
Vedi?
like a temporary apartment thing.
Gotcha.
So
Okay,
it's just
okay.
they gave me a place so I could find my feet, and then Vedi and I found a place together.
Gotcha. Okay, so was the decision to move to Berlin crazy for you? Because I mean, I talked to Dracos, right? And in his story, he's like, I could go to Australia or Korea, and he said he hadn't really left the U.S. much before, but obviously you were home is wherever your friends are. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think the only tough thing with it was that my girlfriend and I were not going to be in the same country, and I
Yeah.
like me moving to Berlin was definitely part of the reason that relationship is no longer with us. It sounds like it's died, but yeah. Anyway,
I mean, the relationship has
the
died in a
relationship
way, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's finished. But it was relatively easy for me to make the decision because I knew this is what I wanted to do, and for me to do it at the highest level, I had to be in Berlin. And so
Okay.
it was I want to put everything I can into this because what's the point of me having left medicine to then not dedicate myself fully to it?
And so this, I mean, all along, I guess this was just been the dream. Like you're like, it's finally happening. Like this has been a goal for you that you've been driving towards for a long time.
Yeah, it was. I think up until the end of last year, I would say that I felt I was on that high, right? I was on that cloud nine, feeling really happy about everything. And
You
then
can't use
throughout
that term when you're talking to a North American
I
person.
mean,
It means something entirely different.
oh, that's true. That's true.
You're feeling great.
I was feeling great. I was riding high.
Yeah.
This last year has been an interesting one. Or the last 7 months, like moving to freelance has been a big change for me,
Okay.
and it's definitely altered the way that the office dynamics work. And then obviously I moved out so I could see what it's like living alone. And I was like, oh, it's fine. I'll go and meet my friends every now and again. I can go in, once every couple of weeks, have dinner,
Yeah.
and then COVID hits, and so I've kind of just been sitting alone in my flat for the last 4 months.
Well, before we get to
sorry.
this year, I'm kind of curious what was the experience like of transitioning in to the LAC environment and like making friends with all those folks and really like solidifying yourself as a caster there.
I think I was very fortunate that my Challenger series cast had been predominantly with Betty, so I already had like an established duo that was beginning to work together, right? So I I was also fortunate I kind of came into the EULCS on the upswing. Like the year after I joined, we went to LEC. There was the whole rebrand. Everyone knew it was going to happen. You had this kind of like mood lifting that from what I understand, the mood in the LEC or the EULCS camp, like 2015, 2016 was nowhere near where
Yes.
it was when I joined. And obviously that was me joining the team, and that's where the big transitions happened. But I was, yeah, I already become friends with Quickshot. I'd already become friends with Vedius, and then Dracos for the longest time I had seen as a competitor and as like he was the guy I had to beat, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
Quickshot's the best, and then Dracos is next. And I there's always been this, and it comes from me much more than it comes from him. But there's always been this like barrier to us fully being friends because I've been trying to compete with him, and only over the last couple of years, splits have I really been able to work through that myself because although we're competing, we're still really good friends, right? And
I mean, it's tough. I wish that there were more systems in place for the casters to feel like they are there to lift each other up, and less like who gets to cast the finals?
I think there were definitely those in like there are definitely those systems in LEC. Like we spent a lot of time last year making sure they were there, but at the start it was very much a dog eat dog world in my mind, at least. Or maybe I was just I have to prove myself. Shox and I got on really well from the start. We both like going out clubbing, so it was a very easy connection for us to make. And also like she is like quite in touch with England, and like she enjoys it over there, so we had very similar ideas of like there was an easy middle ground for us to reach. And then since then, like Stress was there. He and I were relatively good friends, but then he left. And Pyro and I were relatively good friends, but he left. And Frosk and I and Ender and I are now like starting to really develop close bonds. So getting into the system, I don't think was awful. I think I put a lot of time into making sure people understood that I was there to be the best. I think there was at the start an expectation that I could just leave. And it took me a while to convince Dirk, like our executive producer, that I couldn't just go back to medicine, because I can't. I'd have to redo med school basically to do it now. I'd have to. I think the last time I checked, I'd have to redo the final year of med school and redo my exams, and then maybe I'd be allowed to get back in.
Interesting. That's wild.
Yeah. Although over COVID they reinstated my license, so right now I have a license. If you need anything, I'll write you up something.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I don't know if that works when you're in Berlin and I'm in California, but
I mean, also, I don't think that any pharmacist would fill out a script for me right now. So, but yeah, I think the biggest hurdle I had was convincing people that I wasn't just here for a lark and that I actually wanted to make this a career.
Yeah. The way you kind of describe it, it makes it sound like people thought you might have been a dick when you first showed up. I
think I was a bit of a dick when I first showed up. I'll be honest. Like I came from university where I was one of the rugby lads. I was quite arrogant. I think growing up as the pastor's son also put me in a position very close to power for a lot of my life. And I think I definitely had an attitude that was a little holier than thou and a little arrogant. And I've worked very hard to try and get rid of that. And I've had enough mental breakdowns over the last 2 years to try and work through that. But I was definitely a bit of a dick. I was definitely a bit of a lad. I was definitely a bit of a yobbo. And I remember, sorry, yobbo is like a lout. Would you use lout?
Nope.
A lad, like a guy who's out there like, oi, 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 let's get some drinks in. Oi,
like a bro.
Like a bro or jock. Okay. Like, okay, yeah, okay. I was a bit of a frat boy.
Okay.
Not to that extreme. Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I still remember times when I would assert my dominance in the office by taking a dig at Vedi or something, right? Like it was a display of masculinity that really didn't need to happen, because I could, like, you prove yourself in an office environment by doing your work well and by being good at your job, right? You don't prove yourself by being like, hey, I'm better than this guy.
Right.
So that's something I've had to work through. And I think that my initial impression wasn't ideal. I think people saw that underneath that there was a guy that was really willing to work and really willing to try hard, but I have worked through some of those more laddish tendencies over the last couple of years.
Laddish, I agree. I feel like I don't know if anyone will be able to appreciate this interview to its fullest extent unless they are also English. I feel like there's at least 5% of it that some of the meaning and intent will be lost. But so that's it's pretty remarkable that like you came in, had to go through all that, sort of recognized a lot of that. You and Vedius, it's interesting that you mentioned that you would poke at him, because it seems like you guys are good pals from the...
We're really good pals.
Yeah.
But being pals doesn't come without struggles, right?
Yes.
Like we still get into long arguments about semantics, and both of us think we're arguing different points, but we're actually on the same side, and all we're doing is arguing over a word, right? Like there's a great joy I find in having a friendship with Vedius, but there's always going to be things that you mess up and things that you fail at, and I think working through those is where you really solidify and make a friendship concrete, rather than it just being fragile.
Yeah. Well, I know we're a little over time, but I do have a few more questions. Just sort of now that we're at this point, now that we've caught up concurrently. You said that this has been a tough year for you, and going freelance and all that stuff is not maybe in the middle of a pandemic been what you had. So what was the decision to go freelance, and how's it played out?
It was pretty one-sided in terms of what I got offered. I was told, here is your freelance contract, and you can either sign this or you don't sign a contract.
Gotcha.
So that, like, I understand why it happened from a business side of things. It makes perfect sense for the LEC to do it this way, right? Like, most entertainers are on freelance contracts. It was jarring when we had developed such a strong team atmosphere and such a good working relationship to then have to move into this, because we went from like 4 days in the office now to one. I don't get the one-on-one time that I'd get with the other casters that I would have used to. And then obviously COVID hitting has made it even tougher. Like, in terms of finding extra jobs, I'm in a really good position. You know, I've cast some Valorant, I'm doing some other stuff, but the dynamics of the LEC team at the end of 2019 aren't the same as they are now.
Yeah. Are there things about it that you've been enjoying, at least on the freelance side?
I get paid more for certain things. I guess, like, there is a degree of freedom, and it's quite nice to, like, be able to dictate sometimes. Say if I have a really off Wednesday or something, I just be like, hey, I'm just going to play computer games today, and I don't have to go to the office and stuff like that. That's quite nice. And I'm exploring a few more avenues of doing stuff that I wouldn't have done as a non-freelancer, and I think that's fun. But my passion has always been the LEC, or always, the last however long I've been casting League of Legends, like the last 5 years, forever basically, has always been the LEC, and I was really excited to grow with the LEC and grow in that space, and the ability to grow in that space is a little hampered. And I think part of that is I haven't deliberately tried to push myself as a freelancer to help the LEC. Ender is really good at it. He's like looking at all these cool things he can do, but I haven't quite found the thing that drives me in that space yet.
Yeah. It's actually interesting because I had no insight into the fact that this was not, like, I think on the heels of Shock's moving to freelance, I think a lot of people expected, like, oh, this is a thing that people are doing, in a very excited way. I did not realize that this was something that was sort of dictated to you or prescribed.
So I don't know how it is for the other people. For me, I don't really care about the other, like, some of the other stuff, right? Like, there's some games I really enjoy. I really enjoyed when I cast Valorant. But if you could tell me you can just cast LEC for the entire time, you can work with us, I would have done that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's this interesting sort of balance to be struck, because I don't feel the same passion for the LEC that I would have done at the end of last year, and I'm trying to rekindle that right now. And
I guess you said that there's opportunities potentially for you to, like, identify areas and pitch, like, hey, can I do this or whatever?
Yeah, like, I still pitch cold opens, and we pitched Newsflash, and we did the first episode of that recently, and you pitch segments and such. But the thing I'm really looking towards now is, where do I find my niche outside of the LEC that I can really thrive in, right? Like, I've been debating the idea of, like, a late night talk show type thing. It's similar to what you're doing, but I don't want to step on your toes, obviously, Travis, but, if you want to have a chat sometime, you can have a European cousin. Anyway, there's a bunch of different things I'm pitching to myself. I just haven't sat down and really worked through what grabs me out of those.
That's interesting that you're kind of going through this process, because I feel like a lot of people find themselves in that moment in their career, in this job, where it's like, what do I do next? And it can be pretty intimidating.
Yeah. And I think for play-by-plays, it's actually even, like, I find it quite difficult, because Dracos has done a really good job of finding himself a content niche. And color casters, you always have the options of, like, do I go work as an analyst? Do I go work as a coach? You get approached for GM positions and such as well, right? But I think play-by-plays tend to be looked at as less analytical as a whole. So the assumption is you couldn't do business because you don't have the analytical brain, right? And I've even been debating getting an MBA just to prove to people that I can be smart again, right? So
this sounds like you're hitting a level of insecurity right now. You're like,
yeah, no, there definitely is. There definitely is. Like, 100% there's insecurity. I know we're running over time, but I'll just quickly hit this. Like, I see everyone else on the LEC doing so many really cool things. Like, I talked to Endo about some of the cool stuff he's doing. Like, he writes the entirety of the LEC update. That's flipping amazing. Vedius and Dracos, they made Electronic. Shox is off doing, like, gallivanting the world. Frosk is doing all these really cool things as well. And I'm just sitting here like, I love casting. And, like, I can't become the premier Valorant caster because I'm a good League of Legends caster, and that's most of my job. So where do I take this love of casting and actually find a new avenue for it, right? So like 100% there's insecurity. My colleagues are so amazing and so great, and I worry that I'm not going to be able to keep up. And I remind myself daily that I just have to be better than I was yesterday, but it's difficult.
Man, it's interesting because I feel like so many people in this role can identify with that. Like the amount of times I've heard, even from some of the names that you've given, like just concerns or insecurity, or like they feel like they're not able to hit it or whatever. It's remarkable,
I mean, I think it's like having a worry that you can't compete is definitely going to be common, especially when it's a competitive field. And the inferiority complex, I think all of us have it to some degree in some way, or a lot of us have it to some degree in some way. It's just, I am driven by the things I'm passionate about, and I haven't found that passionate thing yet.
Yeah.
I will in the end.
Is there, do you have any ideas on, like, let's say LEC disappeared tomorrow,
Yeah.
Would you have ideas on what you would do next? Go cast another region, I guess.
Yeah,
I
mean, I'd probably look for League of Legends casting jobs first. But I've been dabbling in getting back into writing. So this is like, I couldn't do it as the job next, right? In all honesty, if League of Legends collapsed and I couldn't find a League of Legends casting job, I'd probably become a doctor again.
Okay.
Because it's just the easiest, right?
Yeah.
It's the simplest thing to find something in. But I've been dabbling with writing again. I used to write a lot in high school, and I really enjoyed it. And even if it's just a creative outlet, just putting words on paper, like fashioning stories, writing some poems, could be good fun.
Okay.
So,
yeah. What do you write? You said stories and poems, so.
Yeah. So I used to write stream of consciousness novelettes. So Journey of a Young Man is a good example of it's the plot is how the person develops. The key motif is how the person's thinking develops throughout the story instead of the plot points, right? So that's what I used to write, and I used to write a lot of very dark poetry as well. But I think everyone did that in high school, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Fascinating. I didn't know. Do you do much reading? Fantasy novels, maybe?
Yes.
Have you read the stuff that I've been talking about?
What, recently?
Well, like
so,
all the Brandon Sanderson stuff.
Yeah, I've read Stormlight Archives. I've read Mistborn. I've read Name of the Wind in that series as well.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to the next one. Yeah.
Okay, maybe now I found another candidate for Mark and my show that we kind of want to do. So maybe
want to do a book club.
Yeah, book club or something. I mean, I'm definitely I was planning on this week and I got lazy yesterday. You said that whole you're not feeling great mentally on a Wednesday, so you decided to play video games. That was me yesterday, which was a Wednesday. So I can identify with that, but I definitely want to start a book YouTube channel. Anyway, not about me. Is there anything that you want to communicate to like any of the people out there that follow you or watch this, or just any big takeaways that you want people to have?
I'll give you the mantra that I'm going by at the moment. There's a couple of things I've been thinking about a lot, especially I'm trying to work out more and I'm trying to be fitter. And I had someone reply to a tweet that I put out today about like a running time I did, and they're like, oh, but it's not very fast, is it? And the big thing is, it doesn't really matter if you're not very fast at the moment. All that matters is if you're better than you were yesterday, or if you're trying to be better than you were yesterday. And I can't be the best in the world at everything, probably at anything. Let's be honest. Captain Flowers exists. I can't be the fastest in the world. I can't be the best writer, but I can be the best me. And so that's what I'd say to you all out there, right? It's a really difficult time right now. If you're not the most productive you've ever been during a global pandemic, I think that's allowed. But you can still be the best you can be right now.
Great words, and I gotta say that's the classic Twitter thing, because I look at your social media and see all the work you're doing, and I'm like, man, I am lazy. I got to do more hiking than I do, and I love the idea that you post this crazy achievement, and somebody goes, yeah, but it's not very fast, is it?
I will give him credit. When I said I'm not the fastest, but I'm being the best me I can be, he replied with, that's a good attitude. Well done. So I give him credit for that. He kind of redeemed himself.
Great, you turned it around. All right. Well, either way, thank you so much, Medic, for taking the time. For everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all this stuff right here on my YouTube channel.
Alienware.com/Travis.
Thanks, man.